Hi, my name is Jan Plagge. I'm Head of Applied Research at STOXX, and today I would like to talk about factor investing. Starting with the question of what factor investing is all about, here I think it makes sense to elaborate a little, go back in time, all the way back to the beginnings of modern portfolio theory, to the 1960s, where we were told that there is only one source of systematic risk in the market, explained by the capital asset pricing model, measured via the beta of stocks to the market factor. And we were told that this factor is the only factor that is actually worth a reward. Now, as time went by, in the 1990s, we were told by academia at the start that there are in fact other systematic sources of risk existing next to the market factor, parallel to the market factor, such as value and small cap, that are also found to explain returns, that are also found to explain risk. This was the beginning of the way we view the world, we explain risk and return nowadays. Now, over the course of the next 2 to 3 decades, so we discovered, not only academia, but also practitioners discovered more and more additional factors next to the market factor, size and value, such as quality, low risk, growth, etc., that are all found to explain risk and return. So as a first use case, so to say, those factors were applied when it comes to explaining risk and return of existing portfolios. So portfolios have been constructed completely agnostic towards all those factors, while the factors have been used to explain those traditional portfolios. In recent years, we have then gone one step further, become more active, so to say, and started to tilt portfolios actively into certain or towards certain factors, towards value, towards momentum, towards growth, etc., in order to actively exploit those factors and harvest the associated and hoped for return. With regard to the use cases of factors, we see mainly 2 different cases. One is clearly the return-seeking component. Those factors may be understood as alpha relative to the broad market. As a consequence, investors expect a return, some type of excess return in excess of a traditional broad market equity exposure. So the return-seeking component, I believe, lies at the core of using factor indices at this point in time. However, we also come to understand that factors are, especially when constructed in a market-neutral manner, extremely lowly correlated to the broad market. And this low correlation has a completely different use case, or represents a completely different use case just in itself, as market-neutral factor indices can be added to an existing exposure, market exposure, in order to reduce risk. Low correlations are extremely beneficial when it comes to reducing the overall risk in a portfolio. So an investor that may already have a broad exposure to, let's say, the STOXX Europe 600 may be able to reduce the overall risk by adding market-neutral factor indices next to this broad market exposure. If we look at factors and flows, capital flows into factor indices as they happened over the last years, I assume that the most popular factors at this point were mainly volatility and or low volatility and value. as they saw significant asset inflows mainly in the ETF market. More recently, we also see a pickup in assets flowing into multi-factor indices, as investors do not always have a particular view with regard to the behavior, the performance of a single factor index. And in lack of such a view, it may be beneficial to just broadly diversify across various factors, various sources of risk. And I think multi-factor indices are here an ideal underlying for such an exposure. With the recent launch of futures based upon the iSTOXX Europe factor indices, investors now have a very efficient instrument in order to exploit factors, not only in a long-only manner, but also in a long-short manner. When going long the future on the iSTOXX Europe factor index, any factor index, and short the future on the STOXX Europe 600, the investor is left with the pure factor. As within the index construction, we aim at making sure that the only difference between the factor index and the STOXX Europe 600 is mainly the factor that we target, for example, value. So when going long the factor index and short the broad market index, the remainder is pure factor. And I think the recent launch of futures plus the existing futures on the underlying index give the investor exactly this opportunity.